For this week's Think Tank Central, I'm joined in the studio by Baruch Ben-Neria, an expert in Russian military history who served as Israel's ambassador to 2 states of the former Soviet Union. And from Washington, I'm delighted to be joined once again by U.S. Ambassador William Courtney. He's an adjunct senior fellow at RAND, chairman of the Board of Trustees of the Eurasia Foundation. We also have a third guest this week. Joining us from Philadelphia is retired U.S. Navy Captain Gary Tabach, a former chief of staff for NATO's Military Liaison mission in Moscow. So, Gary, let's start with you. As the only warfighter among us, fluent in Russian no less, what do you make of those audio recordings of the Russian captain and the manner in which the Russian Navy sees those Ukrainian vessels?
Well, one, I recognize it's truly in Russian and does sound like a Russian captain because of so much vulgarity there's in his language that they had to beep the whole thing out. But I'm sure the honorable ambassadors will talk about the sea rights and the maritime rights and agreements that were done, diplomatic and political side. So I'd like to say a few words as a sailor. I think that as lately Russian athletes are not what's in Russian called, they're not handshakeable, they're not approachable, because other athletes from other countries look at them and saying, you know what, you're really cheating at the Olympics. You're really not honest. It's not a sportsmanship. You kind of betrayed our brotherhood of competition. I think that today many sailors around the world will make Russian sailors not shakeable.
Oh my goodness.
Handshakeable, because they have betrayed the maritime brotherhood. You do not act like this. You do not ram a slow tugboat that stopped, and that it's clear in the video that the tugboat was taken, surrounded by the Russian warships, the cutters, what we call Coast Guard cutters, and they stopped and they purposely rammed it. We just don't do that.
Very important points, very important. I want to move it over to Bill. And President Trump so far has been fairly non-committal with respect to possible U.S. response options. Are there any, in your opinion, that he may be willing or able to take?
Well, the president did say that he might not have a meeting with President Putin on the margins of the G20 meeting in Argentina, and he has referred to this as aggression. There are a number of options that the West could carry out. 2 of the most obvious. One would be to have more NATO warships patrol in the Black Sea, perhaps even escort Ukrainian vessels if they are under threat. The second set of options has to do with sanctions. There are 2 bills in the U.S. Congress that could offer expanded sanctions on Russians. It's possible that if this incident is followed by other incidents, that Congress could impose brand new sanctions on Russia.
Let's move it over to Baruch here in the studio. And it's the first time that Russia has publicly owned up to direct fire on Ukrainian forces. And I'm wondering, in a perverse way, if this might be a good thing, that instead of having proxies like the separatists that downed that innocent airliner flying over Ukraine, if they own up to the problem, maybe there's an easier way to de-escalate?
I'm sorry. I think everything is depend on the strategic, what they call doctrine of Russia since 2010. So 2008, when Georgia invaded South Ossetia, and it was the first clash, direct clash between Russia and Georgia, it was backing by United States, not formally, but. So since 2008, Russia decided. It was Medvedev, then Putin, okay? They decided no more. Russia started their rebound strategically. First, what do we call it, the nearest border of former Soviet Union, and then in 2015 you can see Russian invaded or was located in Syria. So everything is depend on the one doctrine, which is to to recover the Russian, not empire, I would say superpower, what was Soviet Union. And Ukraine is one of the weakest zones, weakest regions for the Russians.
And he's counting on Western indecision and dithering to promote this plan?
That's right. And when they just occupied Crimea, it was a challenge for the West. It was a challenge for the Ukraine, of course, and for everybody. But the Russians take the example from the Americans. The explanation of the Russians, the Americans are ruling the whole world. They involved everywhere. So why not us? So that's the reason why now, when they constructed the long bridge of 70 kilometers in Kerch between Crimea and Russia, this was a strategic place, strategic center, which they don't give to anybody.
And they coveted that all along, you're saying.
That's right.
Let's move it over to Gary. And as a former NATO liaison, what kind of a reaction do you expect from the alliance? Could this accelerate plans for eventual membership of Ukraine, or perhaps just the opposite?
Well, it can. There is a way that NATO can make an exception, because there is arguable borders, and therefore Ukraine and Georgia cannot be part of. That's why I said part of NATO. That's why I think Putin does those things partially for those reasons. But I think that if NATO really would want to, they can do it. But I don't think it is really necessary, because there's, just like Israel, and just like Japan and Korea, there are countries that are friends of NATO and they're friends of the United States, and they take part in all of the operations that the NATO is involved. So Ukraine and Georgia could be part of that kind of a friendship. It doesn't necessarily need to have that piece of paper saying we're part of NATO. And Putin and Ukraine and all those things is, again, it's a problem of Europe, really, not the United States in a sense. It's again that Europe is not taking part.
Right. Well,
they're not playing their share part.
Let's move it over to Bill. And I'm sorry I didn't see you wanted to jump in before to something that Baruch said.
I did want to make one other point. In recent years, Russia has increased its military activity with regard to several areas around Russia. So Russia's established new military commands in the Arctic Sea region and also in the Black Sea region based in Crimea.
Right.
And it has heavied up its naval presence in the Caspian Sea. So if you look at the seas, the Arctic, Black, Caspian, and now the Sea of Azov, there seems to be a pattern that Russia is trying to increase its military capacity in all those areas.
And let's move it to Baruch. As the ambassador said, Russia obviously has a strategy. What do you see as the American strategy? And given the sanctions that are starting to bite into the Russian economy and the effect it's having on Putin's popularity at home, what on earth would he gain from a war with Ukraine?
On this point of time, it's very difficult to stop the Russians. Not because they are so strong, but they have the initiative, they have the guts, what we say it, and even the sanctions, the economical sanctions on the Russians, they don't harm them too much. But the problem with the Russians are not the sanctions and not the West. The problem of the Russians, they don't have partners. They are alone in all this strategy. And Iran is a partner, of course. Syria is a partner, but that's not the partners they are looking for.
Right.
And even China sometimes are close to the Russian and so on, and there are some kind of cooperation between China and Russia, but Russia is alone by itself.
And investing dearly in these foreign adventures.
And what is the main decision of the Russians, as I believe, as I understand, it's to recover the whole regional zone of influence, which was during the Soviet times, and even more. And this Ukraine, Georgia, Moldavia, and so on and so on.
Russia great again.
Yes, not great, but have to rule the whole rule and to be present in this region.